Good afternoon, everyone. I think the sound problem is now sorted out. Welcome to our webinar, What is an Inclusive Classroom? My name is Alette. I have about 20 years experience in different spheres of education. I'm very passionate about teaching inclusively and hope that I could inspire you this afternoon to also strive to become a more inclusive teacher. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. There's time for that. So in the meantime, you'll see there's a tab for questions. You're welcome to paste your or type your questions in there, and then we will get back to them at the end of the webinar. Also, if you have any suggestions that you want to share from your experience, you're welcome to do that. And then there are two downloadable handouts that you can click on and download for yourself. The one is the slides for this presentation, and the other one is more workshops that we have on inclusive education to assist you as a teacher. Okay, what are the outcomes of today's webinar? So what are the outcomes for today's webinar? It's plain and simple. First of all, we need to understand what the benefits are of an inclusive classroom. And then we need to learn how to create an inclusive classroom. Now, obviously, this is only a 1-hour webinar, so we won't be able to go into a lot of detail today, but hopefully there'll be something at least that you could take from today and use in your classrooms. I don't know what's going on with my, there we go. Okay. So I just want you to do a quick poll. I want to think, honestly, how inclusive do you think your classroom is at this current moment? So I'm going to launch the poll. Those of you who are on a computer will be able to see the poll. And if you're on a phone, you may not be able to see it, but you can still, now the okay, no, it seems like it doesn't want to. Technology is not on my side today. Okay, I think now you should be able to see it. So the questions are, the question is, how inclusive do you think your classroom is right now? And then you can either type in the question box or you can answer the poll itself. Number 1 is not at all. 2 is a little bit, 3 is quite a lot, and 4 is very inclusive. So if you're very confident, then that'll be a 4. So you can either type 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the question box so that I could also see those of you who are not able to do the poll. Otherwise, I see 50% have already voted, so it's going well. Very well. Okay, so I'll just give another few seconds so I can see the votes are still coming in. We're on 70% of all the votes. Can't wait to see the results. Okay, it's still coming in. Okay, seems like now everyone has voted. So let me just close this and then I'm going to share the results with you. So, not at all 4% of you says that you're honest, that you're not inclusive at all, which is fine. That's why you're here today. So hopefully we can change that. And then 52% says a little bit. So at least you've tried. You've started the process and now you can just carry on and improve from there. And then 34% says quite a lot. So to you, I want to say kudos, well done. And then we very inclusive. So I am so impressed that we have people like you in this workshop, and yet you come and you attend more because you believe in lifelong learning. So please note that this is a webinar, so it's not an interactive as a workshop would normally be, but still I know that a lot of you, I can see here 35 plus 9, so it's 43% of you are able to also give inputs and share your valuable experience with the rest of the group. So feel free to type in the question box. And like I said, I have left time for questions and discussions at the end. Not discussions, but, you know, electronic discussions. So we will have time to get back to your experiences if you want to share that with us. Okay. Just don't know what's wrong with this. Okay, great. So I just want you to see that there's the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, and there's White Paper 6, and there's all kinds of policies and documents, but I am not going to tell you now that you need to go and read that, because I don't want you to teach inclusively because they tell you to, because you have to, because it's written in some policy. I want you to teach inclusively because you want to change lives, and you want to include every child in your classroom, because you think of all those children as if it was your own, and you want to treat them as if they were your own child and give them those possibilities and opportunities in life. So that's why I'm not going to touch on all the policies. I want you to change in your heart, because that's where inclusion starts. So just think of this. Fair is not everybody getting the same thing, because that's what we always thought it was. Remember, my mom always said, we were 4 children and everyone needs to get the same thing. But actually, that's not what we needed. Each of us needed something different. So fair is everybody getting what they need in order to be successful. And keep that in mind and try and make that mind shift, so that when you teach, when you prepare, when you are in the classroom, when you think of assessments, that you start thinking about really being fair. So what is an inclusive classroom? Now, normally this would be a discussion if we had a workshop, but I've actually gone and put most of the aspects on this slide already. So we're going to stick to this slide for a while. First of all, an inclusive classroom is welcoming and safe. That means that you can't have a shouting contest in the classroom. So you need to be calm, you need to be collected, you need to be prepared so that your learners will feel safe. You need to have structure and what's the word I'm looking for? Your learners need to understand exactly where the barriers are, not the barriers, sorry guys, the standards, how they need to behave, what they are allowed to do and what not, because when they do have those guidelines of what is acceptable behavior and what not, they feel safe within it. So you also want to be safe in terms of all learners should feel that they can participate. They should feel that I'm valued and I'm going to get an opportunity and I can participate in the way that works best for me. So it's a safe environment, not just physically, but also emotionally and academically. All the learners have to feel safe. Then all learners must have what they need. Okay, so I know that is a big problem, especially in South Africa, but we need to try as much as possible to make sure that our learners have the necessary textbooks. If you're using electronics in your classroom, that everyone has something that they can use. Sorry, I just want to see, you don't see, no, only the, okay, I just want to see that. Seems like you guys are not seeing the slides like I am. Okay, just quickly, if you can just in the box, just tell me if you can now see the slides. Okay, so what is an inclusive classroom? Right, we see now, wonderful. Okay, yeah, it's a bad day for technology. Okay, but that's not going to stop us. Okay, nothing's going to stop us. So all learners should have what they need in all aspects. It means that if you have a learner with a special need, you also need to accommodate that learner. We'll go into a little bit more detail later on. Then we have to adapt learning content. So that means that when I look at the contents I need to teach, obviously I'm bound to the curriculum. Some people say they still can't see me. Can I just quickly ask you if Arifa, no slides? Okay, let me just see what's going on. Sorry, guys, just give me a sec. Okay, let's try again. Seems to be working now. Great. Okay, so we're back to adapt learning content. When you talk about your learning content and you prepare your lessons, you need to think of the learners in your classroom. So obviously, your first step is to get to know your learners. And that's, thank you, everyone can see, perfect. Thanks, everyone's on board, thank you. So you need to prepare your lessons so that you don't just do your lesson the way you were taught. Remember that all of us have our own personalities, our own educational background, our environment that we grew up in, possible prejudices or perspectives on life that is not representative of the whole world or everyone in your classroom. So what you need to remember is when you plan your lessons and the content that you're going to teach your learners, you need to make sure that you keep in mind the different learning styles. You will have visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners, and the way that you teach cannot be the way that you learn and the way that you have learned and the way that you have been taught your whole life. That's not what should be happening. So we need to think of that when we adapt content. I'll go into more detail later on. This is an introductory slide. Then teach in a variety of ways. It links up to what I've just mentioned now, that when you plan, you need to think of the different learning styles, the different learning barriers, the different needs of the learners, the different interests, different everything that is different that you need to think of. So even if you have a specific piece of content you need to discuss in the textbook or a comprehension test, you still need to make it relevant for your learners. Then differentiate your assessment. I know that is a tough one because we sometimes feel that we're very bound to what needs to be assessed and how it needs to be assessed, but there are ways around it. Then clear behavior standards. I've mentioned that your learners will feel safe in an environment where they know exactly what they're allowed to do, how they should do it, how they should behave, and also the consequences should they not behave in that manner. Then value and respect the differences. It's a mindset. It's really something that I think most of us have to learn in our lives. We don't automatically just know how to treat different people. As a teacher, for instance, you need to make sure that you are familiar with different religions so that you can respect that, and when it's a special holiday or religious day for some of your learners, that you could share that with them, and they can know that you're interested in them and you care about their lives and their culture and their religion as well. Then it's also important for you to set the example, because if you are not respectful in class towards everyone for different, doesn't matter how they differ, or even if they're younger than you, if you can show that respect, then learners will monkey see, monkey do, they will copy you and they will learn by example. So it's not one of those things where we say, do as I say, don't do as I do. We need to really set an example. Then we need to have high expectations for all our learners. Now, I'm not saying that we need to expect A's or B's from all the learners. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we need to get to know our learners, and we need to inspire them and also create an environment for them and teach in a way that they can all achieve their personal best. Remember when I was teaching grade 6 at some point, I was marking papers and putting on stickers and smiley faces and comments, you know, all those things. I love it. I know children also like it, especially in the primary school. And then one of the learners wanted to ask me something, and she came up to me and she saw the paper I was busy with, and she said, "Ma'am, why did you give her gold star? She only has 60%. And then I said to her, I know you are an 80% candidate, but remember, there's other things that you are not good at, you know, so we need to make sure that we see children holistically and that we always recognize when they are doing their best and encourage them when they're not doing their best to try harder. So that boils down to, I've mentioned now, know your learners. And not just that, they also need to get to know you. They need to know that you are a constant, you are there for them, and you care about them, and they can see and they know your rules, and they feel safe in your classroom. You shouldn't be, you know, emotionally unstable, if I could say that, you know, like you shouldn't be irrational, or some days you're in a bad mood and other days you're in a good mood, and the children never know what to expect from you. That's not a good thing. Then use inclusive language and diverse examples. So obviously from my perspective, I grew up in a certain way, in a certain culture. So my tendency may be to always use examples that I'm familiar with. And as a teacher, I had to learn to use examples that my learners are familiar with and they can relate to. So my examples should definitely include different races, culture, gender, anything that you think of, and also scenarios. You know, there's this old thing. The first thing I learned when I started teaching was when I was at school, we always had a topic, what did you do during the holiday? And then people would say, you know, we went to the beach, and we went, you know, all kinds of fancy places for holiday. And when I started teaching, it was not like that for most of my learners. And I'd never used that topic again. You know, I changed it because I realized that an outing to the beach may not be something that's achievable for most of my learners. So we need to use examples, and then also language that will include all our learners. Then we need to have a space where learners can practice empathy. I just wish that adult world can also be like what we're striving for now in our classrooms, could be more inclusive. That all people would learn to tolerate people that are different than themselves, and that we can all learn to have empathy with our learners, because if you don't have empathy with your learner, then it's hard to put yourself in the shoes and try and accommodate them. And then another thing about an inclusive classroom is that team collaboration is usually a very big part of learning, and it's good because your learners need to learn how to work together with all kinds of people that they wouldn't normally choose as friends. Okay, just like we need to do when we grow up and we go to work. So the benefit of an inclusive classroom. Okay, learners develop empathy and sensitivity to people who are different from themselves. They promote social and emotional development. They enhance the learning experience for learners. So they improve learners' confidence and self-image, because now I'm not seen as the other one, I'm being included in the classroom. And in the ideal world, learners would be able to see, you know, to accept and to start understanding the differences in their class. I'm looking at my niece, for instance. She's in in a special school. I know these days you're not allowed to use all words, then it's Elson, then you're not allowed to, but we all know what we're talking about. At the end of the day, it's the same thing with different names. But what I want to say is, so she's exposed to all kinds of learning barriers on a daily basis. It's not strange for her to see someone in a wheelchair or someone with cerebral palsy. You know, it's so part of it. And I remember when I took a friend with to their carnival, the annual carnival once, you know, it was quite a shock for her to see all these children, you know, so many of them together with all these obvious barriers, some of them very obvious physically and others not so much. But when you, like your neurodivergent children, when you start talking to them, you can see, you know, there's a barrier. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, she's so used to it at school that when we're outside in a mall or anywhere else, it's not strange to her. Whereas when I grew up, I never saw anyone like that. So to me, you know, it was difficult to get used to. And that's the thing as a teacher, we need to be prepared to get used to different learners with their barriers and treat them equally because they are our equals. And then improve parental confidence. That's another benefit from having an inclusive classroom, because all the parents who have a child with some form of special need will understand and will relate to this now, that it's very difficult sometimes to let your child, to leave them at school and not knowing if the teachers will know how to deal with the child, not knowing if the other learners are going to accept the child and understand the child, or if he's going to get bullied. So it's very important to have that inclusive classroom mindset and environment in your class and also in your school, so that parents would also feel more confident to send their children to your school. So there's everything. Really don't know. Now, useful strategies. Let's get a little practical now. Useful strategies to create an inclusive classroom. You have to understand your learners and you have to use your individual education plans. I know that we have big classrooms and it is not always feasible. But I really want to encourage you to have some form of note keeping where you can track your learners' progress. I know in the younger grades, like in our foundation phase, we always use observation books. And I actually feel that is so great. As a language teacher, I also had an observation book that was from grade 6 to 12 that I used that, because I found it easier when I had to allocate marks at the end of the term, if I could actually use opportunities during the class time that I could include as part of my assessment mark, you know, to see the progress of the child. And when it comes to parents' evenings, it really helps a lot when you can see the progress, or you can see what the learner is struggling with, and you can share that with the parents. So please don't be afraid of that individual education plan. It really is something that learners need. I also work with colleagues at special schools or Elson schools, and what they always tell me is that often learners get there too late, and then the gap is so big that it's almost impossible for them to fill that gap again. So it's our responsibility as teachers in mainstream schools to start with that process of identifying if a learner really needs that kind of special education that may not be able to happen or take place in a mainstream school, so that they can, you know, get to an environment where people are better trained and qualified to assist that learner. Then our mindset must be that we focus on the learner's abilities, not their disabilities. So if you find that a learner is very good with technology, but has a very bad handwriting and really can't do it, then consider allowing that child type an essay instead of writing it. I know a lot of you are now going to say, but oh, you know, now you're touching issues of spelling and copyright and whatever could happen. I just want you to start thinking about possibilities other than what we normally do, to think of that. Address offensive comments promptly. So should there be anything in the classroom that someone says that is offensive or hurtful, or towards any learner in the class for whatever reason, nip it in the bud. Don't allow that to become something big. Just deal with it right there and then and get it out of the way, so that learners know where are the boundaries, and that they don't disrespect each other. Also, when you do have uncomfortable situations in the classroom, where someone maybe now said something that was racially or religiously inappropriate, then use that as a teachable moment and teach your learners about inclusion right there and then, and how to respect and understand each other, and to accept that everyone is not like me, and that the world is not like me. The world consists of a lot of different people, and we need to accommodate all of those. Then introduce cultural diversity into the curriculum. So I sort of touched on this when I said that when you teach your lessons, make sure that your examples that you give and the topics that you give, that they are relevant to all the learners. Then create an environment that allows for mistakes. Your learners have to feel safe. It brings us back to that safe environment. I know that I had some teachers where, I would rather never answer, because what if I'm wrong? They bite off my head, So we need to teach learners that we learn from our mistakes, and the person who doesn't make a mistake will never grow. So you need to try and try and try again, how many times you need to, until you get it right, but that's important. Then review your classroom resources. Think about, what do you use in your classroom currently? Because I know I didn't really use a lot of resources when I was teaching high school. I didn't at that point know what I know now about inclusive education. And I think sometimes we underestimate how resources can help in the learning for some learners. I'll get into more detail about that later. And then give learners an opportunity to participate and share. So make sure that your safe environment that you have in your classroom allows for everyone to participate in their way, and not just certain people. And when I say participate, it means orally, during discussions, in group work, in written work, any activity that you have to do at school. Now, examples of an inclusive approach. Offer different types of reading materials so that you can inspire all your learners to read something instead of, a specific thing they have to read. When I was teaching a language, like and we had the book reports, I would always have nice books, different books, interesting books that, because I know a lot of the children don't have access to books, or they won't make an effort to go and look for a book. I'll even have magazines, on soccer and all kinds of interesting topics that I know the learners asked for and that they would like to learn from me, or read from, sorry. So make sure that you have a variety. And then you can have regular activities for a child with ADHD. You know that what we're doing now, we're sitting for an hour today, it's already pushing it, because depending on the age and also the ability of learners, the concentration period or duration is about 30 to 50 minutes before you need a break. Now, if you are ADHD, you need it even more frequently. So as a teacher, instead of being frustrated with this naughty child, which is most probably ADHD, make a plan, work it into your lesson so that you have something that child can do as part of the activity or as part of the procedure in the classroom, like handing out the books or the tests or collecting something, or even if you give them something that they need to do, those little elastic rubber bands that, or stress balls that they can be busy with, or allow them to draw while they are listening to the while you're having class. You know, a lot of people doodle and scribble when they're talking on the phone, and I think those are the people who also did it or needed to do it when they were at school. So create opportunities for learners if you are aware or you suspect that they might have a specific barrier. Create an activity so that that learner can then be accommodated. And then have regular break times for diabetic child, for instance. Make sure that they get their food when they need to. I was so ignorant when I started teaching, you know, that I would say if you don't finish your work, then come during break time and finish it during break time. I mean, oh my gosh. You know, but luckily those children all survived in some way or another. And I hope I didn't do any permanent damage to any of them. But yes, I never thought of what if one of them was a diabetic, you know, and now I know they need that break. Anyone, they need that break. Their minds literally need a break. And then you can adapt your physical activities and so that a child with in a wheelchair or in crutches or something can also get involved in the activity. So think outside of the box as to how you can involve those type of learners. Then let's just look at diversity quickly. I think we all know this. I'm not going to stand still very long. So the different things we need to keep in mind is the language. In South Africa, we almost never have a homogeneous classroom in terms of language. We have so many different languages. I've even, okay, sorry. Someone can see the slides, someone cannot. I can see the slides on my, okay, just let me know if you're missing the slides. Okay, so I remember that I usually ask my learners what languages they speak. And at any given point in time, in any of the classes, because I had 6 classes per year, I would have between 7 and 11 languages, home languages, in my classroom. Then I was supposed to teach Afrikaans first additional language, which was like their 5th language already. So we need to be aware of the language. So how can we help those learners? We can have dictionaries in the class for different languages. Or you can actually, I'm doing it now on ChatGPT, so I can actually translate. There's also Google Translate. You can translate words just to help you to greet them in their mother tongue, you know, because there's nothing so special than someone calling you by your name and someone talking to you in your mother tongue. So make that effort also to include your learners. And then in terms of the work, look at your having a word bank, for instance, so that you deal with difficult words before you start your lessons so that learners are not left behind. And if need be, I find it helps a lot sometimes if learners explain to each other, especially sometimes in a different language. They just grasp a concept so much easier than when I try to do it with my English. And then we have cultural differences. So for instance, I had a problem with a learner because she would never look me in the eyes. You know, she was always naughty. And I said, you know, because from my culture, if I look you in the eyes, it means that I'm honest and I'm open and you can trust me. And for her refusing to look me in the eyes and always looking down, for her was respect. I only learned it after we had a conversation about it and we sat down and she explained to me, no, ma'am, for me it is disrespectful to look you in the eyes like this. I can't do it, you see. And even her parents, I remember at the parents' night, didn't look me straight in the eyes because they thought that I was some very, I don't know, angel from heaven. So, so be aware of your cultural differences and also keep that in mind when it comes to activities and how you teach in your class. Same goes for religion. I've already mentioned that it helps to be aware of different religions and their special days, so that you could also just mention that in your class and make your learners feel welcome and safe in your class. Then ethnic, race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, and social. All those differences, we are aware of it. Make sure that you try and accommodate all of them in your class. So let's get practical. If we think of differentiation, okay, it means that I need to adapt. What do I need to adapt? I need to adapt the content. So that's the content that I'm going to teach. Okay, so it might be from the CAPS. I give a textbook and I'm following the CAPS, certain content that I need to change. How am I going to do that? We'll find out now. Then it's the process, the actual process of teaching. Me standing in front of the classroom and how am I teaching? That I can also adapt. And then it is the product. So it's the assessment, the work that the learner has to submit for marks. Okay, those are the three main things that we can differentiate. So let's go into detail first with the content. How do I adapt the content for inclusion? I've now mentioned that you need to make activities, like if you do maths, for instance, don't give examples of how they have to calculate. Sorry, I'm thinking of when I was at school, we had this math exercise where we had to work out a diet for a learner who wants to lose weight, and we had to calculate how many calories this does, everything, you know, that she eats per day, how it contain, and then how much she should eat, less or worse or whatever. And then yeah, so I'm thinking that that's, if you have an anorexic learner in your class, for instance, you'll not use that example in maths. You'll rather look into using something else, you know, let them calculate something else, but not the calories. I see that we've got Lorraine saying that an autistic learner won't look into your eyes, you see? So that's also, and I know that some would and others won't, because there's different levels and different types of autism. It's almost like every person with autism is individual, you know. But yeah, thanks for that, Lorraine. So we adapt for inclusion. Then we need to make special adjustments for learners with special needs. For instance, if you have a learner, like the physiotherapist that I visit is like 99% blind, and she told me how when she was studying, her mom would make copies, like enlarged copies of her textbooks that she would study from, you know. Maybe you could have a reader, some app that could actually read the text for the learner if you have a really visual impaired learner in your class, or enlarge the text. I also know that if you make a copy on a slight yellow, not very bright, but light yellow page, that could also assist with focusing for some learners to catch their attention better than white paper. Use different types of activities. So don't always, oh my gosh, and I was so guilty of this. I think I made so many mistakes when I was a first year teacher. You know, I would make them do 20 examples of direct and indirect speech, because I thought, you know, the more they practice, the better it would be. And then now I know there's different ways of doing it. They shouldn't have done all of them in the same way. I should have varied my activities so that the ones that could even role play, then they can write some, and then we can have a discussion. I can show a video of where a conversation is taking place, and then they then have to write that conversation in indirect speech. You know, there's just so much more than you can do. worksheets with numerous activities that they must do, and it's all the same type. I didn't include the different types of learning styles in my class. Illustrate your points with examples that reflect the diversity of your learners. I think it touches on what I've mentioned already, with the diversity of your learners. Yeah, so if I talk about what I do on a Sunday, for instance, then, you know, for me, it would be going to church and then having a family meal, a big lunch. But then you have those learners who don't have the money for a proper lunch. Maybe they go to a soup kitchen or something. So I need to keep in mind when I give examples of what I do over the weekend that not everyone is as fortunate as I am. And then use inclusive language and diverse examples in your teaching materials. I mentioned this one before. So any other suggestions of how we can use, how we can adapt our content for inclusion, you're very welcome to write in the question and answer box. Then we said the content, now we at the actual process of teaching. How can you adapt that process? First of all, stop lecturing. Remember, you can't punish me today because this is a webinar. Ne? So the webinar is more like a lecturing style. But when it comes to your method, don't lecture. Use different ways of teaching so that all your learners can relate to the way that you teach. So use discussions. Let them sometimes write something. Do brainstorming, do project work, do debates, do concept maps, do all kinds of different ways. Use different ways of teaching that you get groups and question and answer techniques. That's the other thing is you need to plan your questions that you ask in class, because often we just plan the lesson, but we don't really think how we're going to teach it, how we're going to convey the information to the learners, and it becomes a lecture as well instead of involving them. So we need to prepare our questions so that we ask them to include our learners. So you ask Sipho, what do you think about the story we've just read? Do you agree with what the hero did or what the main character did? And then Sipho will say, yes, I think he did the right thing by stealing the picking up the lost money in the street. It's not stealing because, you know, when you pick up something, it's yours, you know. And then you can say, okay, so Mary, do you agree with Sipho? What would you have done? Okay, and you have that conversation and you develop critical thinking skills that are also very important for all learners. People make the big mistake of thinking that only normal learners, intelligent learners and learners in higher grades can think on different cognitive levels, and that is completely incorrect. It's important for you to know that even your grade 1 learner can think at all 6 Bloom's cognitive levels. Might be at a lower level than the one in grade 12, but still they can create something, they can evaluate and tell you, no, I like this story better than I like that story. So those skills are there. We just need to open up our learners by the way that we ask our questions in class. I remember also that instead of having a class test to see if learners learned their work, I would have competitions, and they loved it. So I would write a quiz, and then each group, sometimes we divided the class in 2. It could be a bit noisy. Don't know what my neighbors did, but we loved it. And the learners actually learned because they wanted their teams to win. You know, I had these quiz questions and they had to answer, and it worked like a charm. So it's just a different way of conveying information and getting your learners also to learn. Then in terms of organization in your classroom, you can have whole class teaching, but not always. You must change it. Sometimes you use group work, sometimes peer tutoring, sometimes they work individually. Sometimes you can have a mentor and a coach together, you know, somebody who is like with reading. Sometimes we have a good learner and someone that's not that good at reading, and we let them work together so that they can help each other. And then you can have your one-on-one instruction. So while you have group work on that side, in your class, and that group is fine with what they're doing, you can spend time on this group that really needs more of your help. So using different organizations in your class, also the way that you move your desks are important. Certain teachers only have the typical style where everyone is facing the front. Sometimes we don't have more space in our classroom, so we don't have that choice. But it helps sometimes to have a U shape or a circle, or depending on what topic you are training or teaching, there's really a lot that you can do. I speak from experience there. And then the last one is the resources. Look at the resources that you are using. Like I said, bring in technology if you can, if your school allows it, if your learners have it. There's so much that we can do, and technology is not just remember that learners these days are used to it. So it's difficult for us as teachers to compete with technology, because they have all these visuals that they're used to. And they say most that now we edutain, educate and train and edutain, entertain. So we can't, it's very difficult for us. So bring technology into the classroom. Remember that a lot of learners with barriers benefit significantly from using assistive devices. And just having a tablet could already accommodate so many different barriers in your class that you'll be surprised actually to find how it could work. Then have artifacts, have manipulatives, have visual aids, you know, use the learner's work sometimes as a, I just have to introduce you to Petrus Pada. It's, I've had him since I was 5. And this also works very well in class sometimes for a learner who is scared to talk, you know, and you give Petrus Pada to the learner, and then the learner becomes Petrus Pada, and all of a sudden they feel more confident to speak in class than when they would if they had to be themselves. So you can use all kinds of different things. Thanks, Petrus. All kinds of different resources in your class to teach and not just get stuck with certain ones of them. Okay, now adapt the product. The product is now whatever the assessment is. Okay, so that's the product that they have to submit for marks. So assistive technologies, we have mind maps, dramatization, video, making models, PowerPoints, storyboards. They can do all these things. They don't have to give you work in a boring format. These days, they can submit a video that they made, and that could be an assignment. And from there, you could assess how they wrote the text, you know, what the content is. You can assess the presentation of the learner. There's so many things that we can do these days. So please don't get stuck in a rut in terms of that. Then develop a behavior management plan. I know it sounds funny in inclusive, when we're talking inclusive education, but you know, there's sometimes time along the line, it's definitely, you will have discipline problems. And that is why I said in the beginning, set your boundaries so that they know what's expected of them. It must be very clear so they know exactly what they're allowed to do, when they must do it, how they must do it, what they can't do, what will be the consequence if they don't do what they're supposed to. But focus on positive reinforcement. You do always imagine when you train a dog, you know, you don't shout at a dog, you don't hit a dog. When you train a dog, you always have bits of eats, little eats with you, and you reward them every time they do something right. And that is the way that we must always think of our learners as well. We must reward them. It's important that these behavior, you know, like often it's group rules that you have in your class that you have put on the wall, and ground rules, sorry. And then sometimes you also have the school will have a policy on code of conduct, and it's important that learners and parents also know about this so that it's a shared vision for the school. And then, like I mentioned, part of managing your behavior could be to use different types of groups. Helpful tip: remember, you are not alone. Okay, so pair up with someone else, even if it's someone in a different school or someone who teaches the same subject as you in your own school, but pair up, form groups, and share the workload. So say that, okay, I can take this lesson and I can adapt it like this, you know, and then we can accommodate visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners. And then the other, your colleague will then adapt another lesson, and now you have two, but you didn't do all the work yourself. So share your work. Don't be stingy. And those of you who always piggyback on the others, stop doing it. Start working out your own, start contributing so that you have a larger group of teachers that can support each other. And join Facebook and WhatsApp groups so that you can get ideas and tips. And do what you're doing now. Attend teacher training, because it's very important. Remember, when we were taught, when we studied, inclusion wasn't such a big thing. We didn't know about this. We didn't know about all these barriers. There wasn't all these sexual orientations. You know, life is just completely different now. We have technology, so we can't just be stuck to where we were the day we graduated. We need to continuously develop as the world develops. Imagine you going to a doctor. Would you go to a doctor who has his CPDT points at the SPCA up to date, and 10 conferences and all kinds of upskilling activities? Or would you go to the doctor to operate on your heart, the one that graduated 30 years ago and never ever learned anything ever since? You see, we're the same as teachers. We have to evolve as the world evolves. So also we need to upskill ourselves of inclusive education and how to accommodate and assist all those learners that we didn't do in the past. Yeah, and then the involvement of support staff. Those of you who are lucky enough to have support staff at your schools, make use of them, and then see if you don't have them at your school, if there's anything you can do, even if you have someone that comes in once a week, or maybe just on a consultation basis, assist you to with some of the challenges that you experience with learning barriers in your class. Then collaboration with parents. I mentioned that it's very important for parents to know that their children are in good hands, and that's why if there's really a child with quite a significant barrier, it's a good idea to have that individualized education plan so that you can monitor the child's progress and see when you need to do more intervention. Regular communication is also very important, because you don't want the parents on your case at the end of the middle of the year saying that why did my child fail the exam, you know, fail the subject this term. You didn't even communicate it with me. I never knew there was any problem, you know, so just to avoid that as well. And then in conclusion, I just want to tell you that creating an inclusive classroom begins with the teacher's mindset, with your mindset, your actions, and your practices. And I'm going to just inspire you by showing you a video that I hope will help you to get this right mindset. Can you hear the video? Okay, you can't hear the video. Okay, let me just pause the video. I'll see if I can get the sound quickly. And like I said, today is a bad day. Let me just unmute myself. Now the video doesn't want to stop playing. Okay. Are there any questions? I see that the screen is frozen now. Are there any questions? Oh, there's something wrong here. Okay. I see that I think I need more training on the practical elements, like how to use the tablet. Thanks for that. Can you please share the slides and the video? Yes, I will. You can download it now, or you can email me afterwards. And then we have upcoming workshops that we would, for those of you who want to learn more about inclusive education, later in September. And then before you go, you'll see when you end the survey, the webinar that there's a short survey, just 4 questions, quick questions. Kindly answer those just to give us an idea of how we're doing and what we should change in future. Yes, can you please let us know what is the video's URL on YouTube? Yes, I will. I will send this to you. Okay, you're welcome. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone. Going to end the session now.